Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the World War II Daily Podcast with me, Pietro Deserti, and my good friend Samuel De Corti. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, Zach Dunn, the creator behind Global Veteran Stories, where he's interviewed over 85 veterans to share their experiences. But before we dive into the episode, just a quick message from us here from the World War II Daily Podcast. We are an independent show, always working to improve and bring you free, well produced World War II content. One of our goals is to build an accessible archive of reliable information and first hand perspectives of the war. Because as time goes on, those voices become harder to find, and we believe it's important not to let them fade or be mispresented. So if you'd like to support what we do, it's easy and free. Just like the video and subscribe to our channel, it really makes a difference. And if you'd like to go further and help us even more, you will find the link to our Patreon in this episode description. For daily World War II content, follow us on Instagram at the World War II. Actually, it's at World War II underscore daily and at samuel.decorti. Right? The links will be also on the in the description of this episode. So shall us get it started? Zach, be welcome to the World War II Daily Podcast. We'd like to start asking you to introduce yourself. Tell us what you do, what is your project about, and where this all comes from.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to talk, obviously to you guys both, and obviously about my project as well. So yeah, Zach Dunn. I'm 25 years old, born and raised just outside of Toronto, Canada, and for the last 3.5, almost 4 years now, I've been traveling all around, interviewing World War II, Korean War, and most recently Vietnam War veterans. So I sit down with them with my camera, I film their stories, and what I do is I share them with high schools and museums across the world, actually. A few in Canada and the US, and then recently in Europe as well. And as you mentioned, I've interviewed 85 plus veterans from 13 different countries. And it's all about, saving these stories that sometimes haven't been heard before. I'm sure we'll get into it later on in the episode, but there's probably about 20 or 30 veterans that I've been the only person to interview them for the first time, and that's quite a special thing for me. So yeah, that's what I've been doing for the last almost 4 years now, and it's just been an incredible journey that started off just as a fun passion hobby, and has grown to so much more than I can ever imagine. So yeah, it really started because of my granddad. He was a World War II veteran, born and raised in London, England. And I only found out recently that he served in World War II, right around the time where I started my project. I found his medals at my aunt's and uncle's house. Saw that he, like I said, he had the 39 to 45 star. He had the African star, the France and Germany star, and obviously the volunteer service medals. So I was always interested in history growing up, kind of watching documentaries with my dad. But, once I found those medals, I felt this kind of personal connection to a piece of history that I never knew about. That's how the project kind of started in a nutshell.
Our grandfather was a paratrooper, right? Do you
Yeah,
know?
he was a paratrooper, for the British Airborne. So, and I always kind of joke, I'm 6 foot, but he was about 5'4" or 5'3". He was a short little fellow, but so his joke, kind of growing up, I heard from my aunts and uncles and my mom that, again, he was jumping out of planes throughout the war. But the first time he immigrated to Canada in the 1970s was the first airplane that he went up and came down and landed with.
In
So
the
that
actual
was
play.
exactly. So that was his running joke, but a very humble man from my understanding. Unfortunately, I didn't get to know him too well. He passed away when I was about 3.5. So I didn't get to know any of his stories, but just so many amazing things that I've heard from my aunts and uncles. I have 5 aunts and 2 uncles, and obviously my mom, big family from England. So it was yeah, incredible to hear
And
his stories through pictures and firsthand accounts
what
growing up.
was his name?
John Lionel Williams.
John Lionel Williams.
Yeah, he
All
was
right.
born in October of 1921. So yeah, I'm actually quite lucky. Like I said, he was in his late 70s when I was born. So I'm very fortunate to kind of be part of this generation. Just born in 1999, but still having a grandfather in World War II. I'm talking to my friends,
Yes.
my family, even my fiance. They have, it's either a great grandfather or two generations kind of before that. So I think, when my mom was born, my grandparents were in their mid 40s, so they had her quite late in life, but it gave me this connection to a piece of history, right? And not only my granddad, but also my nanny. She fought in World War II. She joined up when she was 15 to the British Army, and then I found out my two uncles also served in the British Army. So yeah, have a connection to World War II, and it's really branched out, to the Korean War and to the Vietnam War as well. I think these stories are so important to share, and it's again history that's slowly leaving us, well, rapidly leaving us, unfortunately, as they continue to pass away.
Yes. So, I'm opening a tab here just a second. Here we go. Um, the first question is usually what, how did you get into World War II and stuff, but that's already answered. So,
Yeah,
I would like to know what you said that you found your grandfather's medals and everything, but what actually you said it was about the same time you started the show. So I wonder like
yeah,
what inspired you to start with your own show? That, by the way, the link will be here in the description of this episode for you to have access to it. Me and Zach, we are doing two interviews together. We hope to do some more, but we can talk about it at some in another moment. So what inspired you to start the show? Was there like a specific moment that you're like, gotta do this?
yeah. No, that's a great question. I think, like I said, it was just finding the medals, but what I was actually doing was it was just out of my own curiosity, because I asked, my mom, and I was like, did Granddad serve? And he said, yeah, he did. He was a paratrooper. Well, we really don't know much other than that. And I was like, do we have service papers, pictures? And she said, well, go ask your Auntie Sandra. And I said, okay. So I drove up, and I kind of had this idea. I said, well, no one in the family really knows much about his service. I said, what if I sit down with my aunts and uncles, his kids, and ask them, the same standard, maybe 10, 15 questions about him, and sort of create this mini documentary for my family. So, my kids, my younger cousins can know this incredible man that brought the family to Canada, and like I said, his legacy still goes on and on. So that was really the idea. I said, okay, you know what I'll do in early 2021, I said I'm going to set out, travel all across Ontario, interview my aunts and uncles that are spread all the way around, and sit down with them, film their recollection or their memories of my granddad. And it was just as my own personal curiosity. And then I thought to myself, okay, so it's 2021. He was born in October of 1921. He would have been 100. And he joined up when he was 18, right? Right in, the start of the war in 1939. And I kind of thought to myself, is there still, I don't know, is there still veterans that are still living and live in Ontario? Is there still World War II veterans living in Ontario? I don't know. So I was searching online, came across this amazing TikTok of Arnold Graham, Canadian World War II veteran, Air Force, was a mid upper gunner on a Wellington bomber plane. And I was like, this is incredible. It was just around Remembrance Day of 2021. I basically messaged the reporter and said, I would love to sit down with him. I want to ask him some questions. And that was my first interview. And, kind of long story short, that's how it kicked off. It was my granddad. I produced this documentary for my family, and then I just call around to the legions, searching up articles, talking to other people. I said, hey, I want to learn more about World War II. I'm 21, 22 at this time. And I said, I want to save these stories for the next generation, for the younger generation that doesn't know about this story or doesn't have this type of family connection like I do. And again, I was I was still an amateur at the time. I still film with my phones, but it was just my iPhone and a $20 Amazon tripod. But I sat down with them for 50 minutes, and it was such an emotional story. Like I said, he had already six brothers. This is Arnold Graham. He already had six brothers serving in all different types of the branches of services, whether it was Navy, Army, Air Force, all across Europe, and also in serving in Canada as well. And he said to his mom when he joined up at 17, because he needed his mom's permission, he said, um, I want to get my brothers home sooner. So please sign off. I want to go fight and end the war soon so I can get my brothers home. So that's what he did. He did over 20 missions, bombing, like I said, over Germany, and eventually was shot down in a mission over Italy. But just an incredible story, which launched this project that has again blown up to my wildest dreams, and it's been such an honor to meet so many veterans and save their stories. And like I said, that was 2021, and now here we are in 2025, and still interviewing veterans and saving their stories. It's been an incredible journey.
It is not extremely nice from you because to say that you're only 25 and you are working to preserve the memories of these people, the stories of these men, and you started because of your own grandfather that you didn't meet, right?
Hmm.
I started all of this because of my son. When my son was born, I was like, I gotta leave something behind for his generation to see, like
Yeah.
his great grandfather, my grandfather, who fought the war as well. It's like I gotta tell the story to him and to his generation. So that's how I started. You don't even have a son to think about it, and even then you decided to do it. It's very honorable. It's very good. Samuel, do you want to proceed to the next question? If you do, you have it.
Sure.
Yep.
So, Zach, why is for you it so important to keep these stories of these veterans alive?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just because of the history of it. I was talking to one veteran a couple of years ago, and I think, in my opinion, it's all about the first-hand accounts. And you can read a book, you can watch a movie, and these are great pieces of history. But once you talk to the veteran face to face and said, I saw this, I experienced this is what my experience was like. This is what it was actually like, what I saw, what I smelt, what the food was like, what the living conditions were like. That's a completely different other experience that, in my opinion, gets more people into history or connecting with these veterans that are not too far away from us in terms of generation wise. We're only talking about 75, 80 years ago now that the end of World War II. And another piece of it is we're losing these veterans at such a high rate. Even looking back at last year, I was reading an article that the Canadian government kind of put out that there was around 5,000 Canadian World War II and Korean War
Sorry
veterans.
for
And I
interrupting
was
you.
just
Just for the record, Brazilian Expeditionary Force sent 25,000 people. There are only 43 alive. Last census.
43.
And you're gonna get to know
See,
two of
that's
them.
incredible. And like I said, I'm so thankful to be able to interview two of
Yeah,
the last surviving. Right, I don't know what the percentage is. I'm not good at math here, but that's a very small percentage of
it
ones who
is.
fought and ones who serve. Right, so same like Canada. We had over 1 million men in service, men and women, serve in World War II, and I think there's only about 1,000 to 1,200 left. That is an incredible number, and even looking at the U.S., so obviously a much bigger population than Canada, over 16 million served, and now I think there's around maybe 66,000. The recent article I read, but again, it's a way to save and record this story for the next generation before it's gone. Um, when I sit down and talk with veterans, they didn't want to be heroes. What they say is, they were really serving for a greater purpose. There was an evil in the world that they want to go and fight. They what my granddad said to my mom is, he really wanted to have the best family and childhood for his kids and grandkids because he kind of lost his childhood and lost his innocence, he used to say. He joined up at 18, stayed 1 year after the war, so he came out at 25, 26. That's a big part of your life, and so that's why it's so important, I think, Samuel, to sit down, record these first-hand accounts are so important. Um, and before we slowly go away. So I've been very, very fortunate to interview as many veterans, and it's been a blessing for sure.
It's funny that you mention some of these things like what I smelled or what I saw, because um, when I get in touch with veterans, sometimes I show them photos,
Mm.
like of the unit that they served in or similar events, to see if it sparks memories. And one of the veterans I interviewed, he passed away sadly. I showed him a picture of soldiers eating potatoes, and he indeed commented on it like, "Yeah, I must have peeled like a million potatoes during the war." Um, and it's a very ordinary comment, but it shows a lot of what he has experienced during the war. It's just something that I was thinking about based upon what you said. But please, Pietro, you have another question.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with the first hand accounts. I'm really concerned about, I never, like when I started this, I didn't actively think about that these guys are dying and they're going away and their stories are going away with them. And this is extremely important to put it all on the internet somehow, you know. So it's gonna last forever. And Cesar, one of the guys we already interviewed here, is a good friend of mine. He's an FEB writer. I recommend his
Wow.
books a lot. Once we were sitting in his workshop. He makes these t-shirts. So we were sitting in his workshop, and he was like, "Yeah, these guys, unfortunately, they are all going away, and the stories are going away with them, and that's why I'm writing the books." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. It's gonna be over at some point. There will be the last one of them at some point.
Yeah.
So let's work in order to preserve all of that." But anyways,
Actually,
getting
that
yeah, go ahead.
oh no, there was the last living veteran of the 784th Tank Battalion. It was a Black American unit to help liberate Dutch town Venlo, and I recall that during the funeral, of the last surviving member, there was even members of the Dutch military attending, and one of them even gave a speech. And it kind of shows like it's the end of a time period, but also that the connection that was formed like so long ago still exists. Yeah, right up to his funeral. And of course, like these guys are passing away, and
Yeah.
it will be different once the last veteran dies.
It
But
will.
let's hope that day is far in the future.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think you mentioned, one of the Dutch towns. I was very, very fortunate to interview Jim Parks. If anyone Googles Jim Parks, he's maybe one of the most famous Canadian World War II veterans. Landed on Juno Beach at D-Day, one of the first waves. Fought through the Battle of Normandy, and actually is the last living, to my memory, the last living liberator of this Dutch town, and it's escaping me on the name. But if someone Googles Jim Parks, Canadian World War II veteran, he just recently visited them for the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands. So, it's even more important when these anniversaries come by. Um, to think of these veterans. And like I said, really remember their stories. And you mentioned earlier, Samuel, about just the firsthand accounts and these small things that I pick up during these interviews. Again, talking about Jim Parks, he was training in Winnipeg. He was born in 1924. He's turning 101 in September, and he was training in Winnipeg. And he said it's if people aren't familiar with Winnipeg, it's really really far northwest of a province in Canada, and it was minus 35, minus 40 Celsius. And he said, they were trying to stay warm on this little stove, and they were frying up potatoes and making French fries. So they would dip it in sort of this fat or lard and frying up, French fries in the middle of the cold. So you can imagine, some of the stories he has there. And then even most recently, Gordon Shotlander, a British-born World War II veteran, but landed on Juno Beach with the Canadians. I thought that was really, really interesting. And he had a very strong firsthand account of obviously being on the landing craft. He was a senior officer at that time. Imagine he was 18 years old as a senior
Years. Yeah.
officer. But he, like I said, the thing that he remembered the most was just the rain coming down, the waves, the bullets hitting the side of the landing craft. And he said the smells was so strong because imagine, all these ships, all these landing craft. He said just the smell of oil and it was so overstimulating. He said it was so loud. People don't talk about how loud this event was. It's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, and you hear planes going over, you hear shells, you hear people yelling. You hear everything around. So and then he said, we got on the beach. He was in charge of 40 men, and I think only 15 actually made it through Normandy. So just another incredible story that recently only opened up because his father served in World War I, and he never talked about his time in the service. So when Gordon had kids, his four boys told him, he said, Dad, please share your story with as many people as you can, because we want to know this history. And again, only recently in the last 3 years, he was actually, he's in his late 90s now. He's 100 years old. He opened up about his story. So sometimes it takes family members to get those stories out, or again, someone like myself or another researcher, or people like yourself, to bring out these veteran stories. So I think I just wanted to share that.
Awesome. Yeah, you mentioned the smell of oil. Every time I go to museums and I come close to machinery like tanks or boats or whatever, I feel this smell, and I'm always like,
Yeah.
of course, I'm in a museum. I'm not in battle, but it makes me feel thrilled, like the heavy machine feeling next to you. The smell is intimidating with the machine. Imagine like
It almost
thousands
puts
of,
you in that mindset,
yeah.
or that atmosphere.
Yeah.
They do such a great job,
I
right?
have I have a video with a Sherman, making a video with a Sherman, that I say, yeah, you can smell the oil and the grease, and you can feel it. You can feel this heavy beast next to you, even when you're not looking at it. But anyways, so you were talking about your interviews, and I want to get more into that. So can you share with us, um, the if there is, or if there are some, you can share them as well. Like the most powerful or emotional story you heard from these veterans.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to pick one, if I'm being honest. Maybe I can pick one of the most recent ones that I've interviewed, but I could probably rifle off a couple. But the one where I was, really emotional during the entire interview, I'll be very honest, I shed a couple tears, if I'm being honest. Was Jack C. Thomas. Now, this is a Canadian World War II veteran, served in the Royal Canadian Air Force during World War II, and he was a tail gunner on Sterling Silver planes. A really interesting story. He served 20 missions, or he flew 20 missions, mainly over, Spain, helping the French and Spanish resistance, with supplies and dropping ammo. And then he did 4 combat missions to the tail end of 1944, and um, dropped off British soldiers and paratroopers on D-Day, and then fought in the Battle of Arnhem. And where the story is so incredible for me, um, he was flying this combat mission, dropping off paratroopers, and again he's at the tail end of the plane, and all of a sudden he smells smoke. There's this massive fire in the plane. His plane got hit with these massive flak, and he was forced to bail out. So he tried to get a fire extinguisher, put out the fire, didn't work. He was forced to bail out. He got his parachute on, tried to jump out of the plane. His latch got hooked on the bottom of the plane, swung him to the belly of the plane, injured his leg. Then he finally had to cut off the strap. And if people don't know, the Sterling Silvers, and I didn't know this at the time until he was explaining it to me. When people think of these bomber planes, you think of Wellingtons, or the B-17s.
B-17s, yeah.
You're flying pretty high. You're 20,000, 25,000, whatever the case may be. But these particular planes, because they were dropping off troops, they had to be at a very low altitude. So he was at about 200, 300 feet. This is what he was saying. So you imagine your plane's on fire. You got to bail out. And now your strap is, so he finally hooks it off, and he's flying. Finally gets his parachute out, but he really doesn't get it out in time because of the 200, 300 feet or whatever he's at. He lands on the ground and is completely knocked out. So now he's still in enemy territory. I mean, the Netherlands still hasn't been liberated this time. So he's describing in such incredible detail. Imagine he's 101 while I'm interviewing him. It's such incredible detail. Now he's on the ground, and he can see his plane just a couple hundred yards away crash and land into some trees, and is now on fire. And he's still kind of out in and out, and then he sees his flight engineer, Harold Hillard, I think his name was. His flight engineer, he got hit with flak. He's got his arm tucked in his shirt. They're trying to escape. Now the Germans are looking for him. Um, he hears shooting, hides in a local farmer's ditch, and ended up, like I said, being captured and spent 8 months as a prisoner of war before being liberated by the Americans. I think he was in northern Germany at this time, and so his story. I mean, that was the way he was describing it. He was so incredibly emotional because you can tell he was reliving that moment. He was only 21 at the time. I think he was. His birthday was a couple days before D-Day. Actually, if anyone wants to send him a birthday card, maybe I'll get you to put that link in the description. I want to try to send him 102 birthday cards
For
because
sure.
he's turned 102 in a week or so. But that one really sticks out for me. And again, a story that has never been shared. I was so fortunate for his grandson to reach out to me on TikTok this past November. He said, "Hey, grandfather, World War II veteran, tail gunner, POW, maybe you want to interview him." And I was like, absolutely, I'll come tomorrow.
Hail
So it
Gunner.
took a couple months for us to organize a day, but that one just sticks out in my mind so much. Never been shared, but just how, emotionally driven, he was. And again, he had very, very critical injuries. He went through, I think, 8 different hospitals and POW camps, and it was incredible to hear that story. It reminded me, if people know the show Masters of the Air,
Yeah.
that is the Canadian Masters of the Air to me. So if anyone has seen that show, just think of Jack C. Thomas from Blem, Ontario, Canada. So that one really sticks out. I mean, I can share a couple if you guys like, but in terms of the Air Force, it really, um, is special to me because of my granddad. There's again another few American World War II veterans I've interviewed, but yeah, that one really sticks out. If I were to pick one, and one of the more recent ones, that one really sticks out, and just incredible. And
Amazing.
I hope I told his story just as well as he did, because it was amazing.
Everybody listening to this right now, you can go to Zach's channel and watch the full interview, and you're gonna get the first-hand account about this crazy story. Something I always think about. I don't like to fly. I don't like airplanes, but I go in. I'm going to Korea. It's going to be like a day inside of an airplane, and it will be in July now. But every time I go in a plane, inside of a plane, and I think that I'm scared, I think about these
Hmm.
guys. We're gonna have a smooth, nice commercial flight. We're not flying over Germany under German anti-aircraft fire, or we're not gonna be hunted down by I was going to say to use the word in Portuguese, but the BF 109s and or any kind of
Right.
fighter. That's the word I was looking for. Any fighter planes. So it's gonna be fine.
And you have a bathroom, and you have
Yeah, you get
food.
a freaking bathroom. It's not freezing
That's
cold.
something that Oh man, that's something that's not told in the books that I read. Something maybe a little funny and uneasy, but they had to go to the bathroom, right? Sometimes they just opened the doors or had a bucket in the back there. That's what some of the Americans were telling me on the B-24s and the B-17s, and but especially the food. I mean, Jack C. Thomas, his typical flights were 7.5, 8 hours.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you had your food rations, but he said it was awful. It was just like crackers and slices of ham or whatever the case may be. And then he had food tablets to be able to last them the whole trip. But these, again, these small, short, shorthand accounts or whatever the case may be is not something that you'll read somewhere, right? It's just more of the funny or humorous moments during times of war, I guess.
And like from all these interviews you've done, all these insane stories, every time I hear one of these stories, I go like, what the heck? Like how these guys could actually endure all of that, not only in airplanes, but in ships and in small islands
Oh
in the
yeah.
Pacific, crossing rivers in Europe, or jumping from airplanes, whatever. Um, is there something you actually learned from these guys that you apply in your personal life? That, like I said, every time I go into a plane, I think about their experience. Is there something that touched you that so deep that you actually use it in your life?
Yeah, definitely. I think being grateful, I think, is the biggest thing I've taken away. Like I said, growing up here in Canada, we have a lot of amazing freedoms. That I take for granted every day. Sometimes you don't think about it, honestly. But talking to these veterans who joined up, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, whatever the case may be, it's not taking life for granted. Be thankful for your freedoms. I mentioned earlier in the podcast, enjoying my youth. Like I said, as my granddad used to say, his youth was lost because of the war. But yeah, being really, really grateful and thankful for the opportunities that I have and that we have in the world now. The world's not perfect, but I think we're getting there gradually, right? But yeah, I think those are the life lessons I've taken away. Um, and especially some of the veterans. I'm getting married next year, and I always ask. Thank you so much. I always ask,
Sorry,
these
I had
veterans
my
who.
microphone closed. Congratulations. Now
Oh,
I
I
heard
read
you.
your lips though.
Yeah,
I knew what you meant.
thank you. Look,
Thanks, Pedro.
I'm already.
There you go. So I always ask these veterans because a lot of the times that their wives are with them, even though they're 99, 100, 102, whatever the case may be, that means they've been married for 75, sometimes 80 years. So I always ask, what is, some of the best life advice or marriage advice that you have, and it's always, understand each other, listen to each other. You're a team, work together. Never go to bed angry. Some of the most common things. But I always, again, look at these individuals as kind of heroes. And again, but they joined up so young, so they had to learn life sometimes later in life. It was very hard for them coming back from the war as well. So those are the few things that I really take away. Just being thankful, being grateful. And yeah, I mean, we just live in a good world, in my opinion. Again, it's not perfect, but I think it was definitely better than 75, 80 years ago, having being drafted or having to fight.
Totally agree. Totally
So
agree.
that got me. Oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Sam. I was going to ask you
okay.
to.
So based upon what you said, it got me thinking. Like, what's your interview process like? Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, no, great question. It's honestly more of a conversation. How I sit down with my veterans and talk with them. I say, introduce yourself, name, birthday, when you were born. And I say, tell me about your childhood. Was it tough growing up in the Depression? What did you do for fun? What were your parents like? And a lot of the veterans say the same thing. I grew up very poor. This is what the life was like. Ken May, Canadian World War II veteran, born in Toronto, Ontario, served in Italy, and he was born in November of 1921. And again, this is Toronto, one of the biggest cities in Canada. But back 80, 90 years ago, he said, "I didn't have running water. I didn't even have indoor plumbing. A family of, I think, 4 or 5, I can't remember now, but he said, yeah, up until I was about 10 years old, we finally got a bathroom. We had an outhouse. So it's just, I'm like, I can't imagine, again, small luxuries like that. We like just even the three of us, anyone that's watching, these small luxuries, that we take for granted every day. Oh my God, running water, that's nothing. We have that. We have, I got a bathroom here,
I
right?
always tell my
Food.
wife, like, stop complaining. You have warm showers, hot showers. Stop complaining.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah, having a hot shower. I mean, that's something, even again, some of the veterans I've interviewed, didn't shower for months on end because they were a prisoner of war and all the cases may be. But that's kind of my interview style. And then I say, take me through what you remember. How did you hear the news that Canada or, whatever the country they're serving in are going to war? Typically it was over the radio or the papers, or sometimes they didn't even hear about it until one of their family members, one of their classmates was conscripted or they joined. That's very, very common theme, and they'd be grade 11, grade 12. Their friends would go over and fight, and some of them wouldn't come back. But I think for me, it's you know I think everyone, really, really likes to learn about the combat stories. Who did you? I'm not about, how many shots did you fire, or what kind of rifle did you have. Sometimes I ask those questions, but it's more about opening up the veteran. You can understand that these are stories from 80 years ago. It's very difficult for them to even open up, even if they didn't see combat, even if they were in Europe or whatever the case may be. It's a very personal thing to them. So that's my style. It's a conversation. It's tell me about your life. I kind of like to describe it's me just having a cup of coffee with you or a beer with whoever the interview the veteran is. So yeah, it's all about opening them up, and then maybe you can ask a couple other questions here and there. So it's yeah, I always try to say, like, this is a person that I'm sharing their stories. Let's try to open them up and have a casual conversation just to make them feel comfortable, because it's intimidating. I was even nervous this morning being on the podcast, and I'm always behind the camera. I'm never in front of it. So this is a new thing for me, but I'm assuming that's what the veterans feel as well.
You're doing very well, so no
Oh,
reason to
thank
be
you.
nervous.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fine.
I
Please
appreciate
keep
that. But
going. Yeah.
yeah, so that's how I look at it. I'm assuming the veterans are nervous. I got two cameras and a big light and a microphone clipped on their lapel there, and it's just, how can I make them feel comfortable? And again, a lot of the veterans I've interviewed have never been interviewed. Maybe an article was written about them, or maybe someone came by and asked them a couple questions. Maybe their parents, or not their parents, but their kids has asked them questions, but never really sit down. So that's kind of my style. Really making them feel comfortable, and having a new experience for them, and kind of navigating. And veterans have been very open and honest. They said, I experienced this, but I'm not really comfortable talking about it. Jack C. Thomas, I'll go back to him. He was treated very poorly in some of the hospitals in Germany, but not all of them, actually, where because he was obviously in Air Force, he had the Air Force jacket and his patches. And he said there was two times where Germans actually saved his life. He said it was through walking through a German town at night, and there was two World War I veterans, German World War II veterans, who guided him through this town at night. And he said, soldier, you need to remove all of your uniforms and patches, and you're going to put on this raincoat. It's raining. It's, now it's maybe June, February of 45, middle of the winter. And he said, trust me, put this on. So he's carried out with an American veteran. And again, if you've seen the Masters of the Air,
Yes.
when they're going through that town, he said, and what the World War I veteran said to Jack Thomas, he said, if we didn't do this, the the civilians would have had at you. That's basically what he said, the townspeople. And he said, what do you mean? He said, well, you would have been pelted with bricks and this sort of thing. So he said there was two times where Germans actually saved his life, and he was so thankful for it. But again, that takes a while to open up those stories. I think I sat down with Mr. Thomas for about 2 hours, and I could have gone more, but I said, I think that's enough for today. And he wanted to keep going. He said, let's go. I was like, I've taken up enough of your time. You're 101. That was one of my longer interviews, but I like to keep it at about an hour. I think that's enough for them to share. And again, it's exhausting to do an interview at 100 years old, right? But yeah, that's my style. I really like to open them up, because you never know what they're going to say. Once you feel, make them feel comfortable, and that's kind of what it's all about. Sharing their stories. So yeah.
Amazing.
So, how do you find these veterans to interview? How do you get in touch with them?
A lot of different ways, actually. Typically the legions are great assets. But again, I work with other organizations, different museums and high schools. There's a high school in Toronto who's been an amazing help for me. But there's a lot of American and Canadian filmmakers as well that have interviewed veterans over the last kind of couple years that, hey, I interviewed this person. Let's, swap a contact or whatnot. And then just from articles I've seen online, I message a reporter, hey, this is what I'm doing. I interview veterans. I share them with schools and museums. Can I sit down with them, or can you introduce me? So a lot of different ways. I've been very, very lucky that people have messaged me directly on TikTok or through my website or through my email or commented on a YouTube video. So that's been a cool experience too, to be able to interview veterans that way. But that's how I find them. It's sometimes at random. Sometimes someone sees a video on YouTube or Facebook and says, "Hey, my grandfather's a World War II veteran. Let me interview him, or let me share this contact with Zach." So yeah, it's been fun. So a lot of different ways, but those are the most common ways I can connect with veterans.
Say there's someone in our audience who says or who thinks, hey, I know a veteran, I should share this with Zach. How can they get in touch with you? What's the best way to reach you?
Absolutely. So just through my website is the best way. So if you search global veteran stories .com or .ca, just go to the contact me section, fill out a contact form, and then I'll get an email directly and put your name and email and phone number there. And that's the best way to contact me at globalveteranstories.com or .ca. Or again, you can message me on Facebook at Zach Dunn, but that's probably the best way through my website. And hopefully we can interview some more veterans for sure.
Yeah, your website will be for sure on the description of these episodes. So you guys, if you're listening to it, be sure you check the description of the episode. There will be all the information you need. You can reach out to Zach if you know any veteran who would be interested in preserving its story, or families that want to put it out, right? So Zach, we are walking towards the end of it. I would like to, before I ask you the last of our questions, which is not really a question, but I would like to thank you very much for your time, for your dedication, for your work. As we've been saying throughout the interview, it is extremely important to preserve the stories of these people. And I'll add something else. Me and Samuel, we've been uh, touching and discussing very polemic topics regarding the war. And one of my personal concerns when we started to do all of this is that as these guys are going away, we are the ones who are standing for the truth, and we
Mm.
try to not allow distortions. Samuel is a historian. I'm not a historian, but his work is more precisely like to do that. But I hope I'm also helping to prevent distortions, or
Mm.
people with bad intentions to get in, right, Samuel? Like we see it a lot. So your work is extremely important, also to prevent bad characters and bad people to manipulate um, the amazing deeds this man achieved. Um, so I always
May
ask.
I?
Go
Oh,
ahead.
what I like to add, Zach, and that is what I like about what you're doing, is that it provides a human touch to the stories. So for example, everyone can tell, like, oh, I flew like in this aircraft, and this is what the aircraft looked like. It had this many engines, and this is how they spin, and whatever. But it's the human touch that you provide with the stories that you do, and I think that's very important. Like, I don't know, say like, yeah, we had to go to the bathroom, and yeah, it was a bucket or something else. Like it provides a very human touch to what they experienced, and I think that is very important, and it's great that you're doing this. That's what I wanted to add.
It's
Yeah,
not a
Chloe.
movie, right? It's not a movie. It's not Band of Brothers. It's not Masters of the
Mm.
Air. These people were actually in those planes, in those battles, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, and it's more. I really appreciate you guys bringing me on the show and all the work that you guys do. I'll make sure to share the podcast. I really hope you guys grow and grow and grow over the next little while. But I like to add on to that. I mean, it's so true. These veterans, some of them are really really great at telling their story. But I went up to North Bay last week in a small town just outside of Toronto, a couple hours north, and the veteran said, "I'm just going to tell it how I saw it." And he said, I'm this is 17, 18 when I went over to Europe, and I said, I'm just going to say what it was like day by day. And he said, I'm not a hero, but this is what I did. I This is towards the end of the war in the Netherlands, and he said, I was instructed. Meanwhile, I'm 18 years old. I got these big glasses. I can barely see because the army issued me round glasses. And he said, I was instructed to take one German prisoner of war back to camp, but I didn't know where camp was. So I said, I'm walking there. I'm in this country. I'm from a small town in Ontario, Pembroke. And I said, I don't know where I'm going. And then, he passed it on to another officer, and then he had to take back, I think it was 80 German prisoner of war. Meanwhile, he said he's standing there, has no idea where he is in the Netherlands, but it was just that realism. You can tell he was still like, he's 100 years old now, but you can tell he's still an 18-year-old kid when he tells the story. That's what was fascinating to me. And even another one, this gentleman just lives just down the road from me and here in Toronto, Rex Arnett. Again, flew on a B-24 Liberator as a wireless operator. Joined up when he was 18, and then when he was 19, he was flying over Germany doing missions to jam enemy radar. That was really interesting. So he would go up with, these bomber planes, the B-17s, but he would be just on sort of the outs, and he would try to draw Luftwaffe planes to him and jam enemy radar, whether it was, obviously radar on the ground or spotlights or whatever the case may be. So he's sitting there. He can barely hear now. He's quite deaf because of the war, but you picture, this is how he's describing it. He's like, I'm sitting there. I got my radios. I'm hearing static, and then a message comes in from the pilot or from ground control where it's in Morse code. I got to decrypt it. And he said within 10 seconds, you had to tell the pilot where to go because you're up in the air. And he said one of the first times he was really, really nervous in one of his first missions. And a message comes in, and he says, whatever, calculate 223, turn right at whatever the case may be. And then he immediately tells the pilot, okay, wireless operator pilot, turn plane to position 224. And then he mutes his mic and he's like, I hope that was right. So you could tell he's 100 years old now, but he was still that 19-year-old kid who's directing this plane that has, seven men on it. So that's again, you talked about earlier, the human touch, the personal accounts. These were kids, they're so nervous. And, a lot of the times they say, I was nervous. And someone who says they weren't, they're either lying or they're crazy. So that was again another story that I've heard and been so thankful to be able to share. But again, they were so innocent. They were again just kids, and the uniqueness of these stories are ones that I really enjoy. Fred Allison was another Canadian World War II veteran, a mechanic in Toronto, and ended up fighting in the Battle of the Bulge because he was repairing trucks. And his commanding officer came to him and said, Allison, put down the wrench, pick up your rifle, and go to the front lines. So you imagine he's fixing trucks one day, and then he's out in the blizzard and cold there in December of '44. So again, these stories are so unique, and again, they deserve a platform, and I'm blessed to be able to give them that platform to share their stories, and it's been a fun journey, and you guys are part of that too. The people that you interview on the podcast, the stories that you're saving, it's all in a grander effort to preserve this history, and you guys are just doing such a great job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's great. It's great to hear. Samuel writes books and he does so much. It's really important. I mean, like if you never, I highly recommend you reading his books. Those are very good. It's easy to read and it's good information. I always talk good things about him, and he's always like that. But that's the truth. That's the truth. It's really good. It's really good work. What he does, it's special. That's why he's here. That's why I invited him to join me. So thank you, Zach, again. I would like to give you the opportunity to do your final considerations. I know you talked a little bit about, I think your final words, but I would like to give you some more time for you to wrap it up. Give your final thoughts on your show, on our show, on this interview, and what we're all doing. I gotta say that I don't know when you are listening to this, but tomorrow Me and Zach, we are doing an interview with some Brazilian veterans. Let's see how it turns out to be, but we are really excited about it, and I'm really happy to have the opportunity just to leave it registered here. And I'm really happy to have the opportunity to be working with Zach in this project with the Brazilian Expeditionary Force veterans. So, Zach, microphone is yours once again, and for the last time, probably.
Well, I just want to thank you guys so much again for having me on the show. For anyone listening and watching, I just highly recommend people just go to my YouTube channel, my TikTok, my Facebook, my website, Global Veteran Stories by Zach Dunn. Have a watch at some of these amazing veteran stories. And again, if you know a veteran, either World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. I've also been trying to interview some newer veterans from either Afghanistan or Iraq. So I'm trying to expand my project as well. But those are the three eras I'm mainly focusing on. So best way to get in contact with me is globalveteranstories.com. Fill out a contact form. If you know a veteran, whether a family member, a friend, part of your community, or someone that you see online that you might have contact with, send me an email. I'd love to connect with you guys. And typically, I love to do these interviews in person. But again, this is something I do on my free time, on my weekends. So if possible, I like to do as many in person as I can in Ontario if I can travel to them, or in the US if I travel for work. But if not, I do them over Zoom, as we're doing tomorrow with the Brazilian veterans. So if you know a veteran in your community, again, all over the world, I've interviewed veterans from South Korea, France, the Netherlands, Sri Lanka, Poland, and other countries as well. So please watch my videos, reach out to me, and hopefully we can schedule some interviews, and save these stories before they're gone, because they're leaving us quite quick, and their stories deserve to be shared and remembered for the next generation. So thank you guys so much for having me on the show. I'm excited to see it uploaded so I can share it around to the people that I know. And just thank you guys so much for everything that you do, and hope to be maybe on again soon. Maybe in a couple years or so, as we both continue to grow, maybe we can do a follow up or an update.
We're gonna be back for
But thank
sure.
you guys again.
Samuel, do you want to say anything else? No, that's it. Okay, so as Zach said, he does all of that during his weekend. So instead of resting and taking a break from work, he keeps working just like us, just like we also do. So I know Zach has also has a Patreon page, right? You probably can find that on
Hmm.
his website as well, right? Yeah. So I highly encourage you all who are listening to this to support his project and support our project as well, and any other project you see regarding history and World War II that takes everything seriously like we do and work hard as we work. We appreciate your support. We both have our Patreon pages you can donate. And by the way, if you donate to our page, to our project, actually, your name will be displayed in every episode. So that's the way we find to retribute a little bit your support. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video. It also helps us a lot. It's free. If you change your mind, you can always unsubscribe. So it doesn't hurt. All right. Um, don't forget to follow us on Instagram. Zach always has also has an Instagram. All the links will be available in the description of this episode. And that's it. If you came all the way down to the end. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. I'll see you guys. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Hello there. Thank you very much for watching until the end. If you liked the video, please leave it a like. If you didn't like, unlike it and tell us in the comments how we can improve. Don't forget to subscribe because that supports us a lot. And stay tuned for more here in the World War II Daily podcast. Thank you very much. I'll see you on the next one.